All right, well, welcome. We are live at the Madison Fabric User Group. We've got Tom Steele. He's going to be talking about PBI project. Can't wait to get into it. Let's head over to Tom. Tom, take it away.
Oh, okay. Hopefully everybody can hear me okay. This is not a slide presentation. This is kind of a follow-along demo. Again, there were some prerequisites, like if you were planning to follow along, I need to add you to a fictitious GitHub organization. And if you want to do the steps that I'm doing, I'm using a Git GUI called GitHub Desktop, and you can download and install that from desktop.github.com. So, these were some setup things. Here at Baker Tilly, we had to request to get on the Wi-Fi as well. I'm assuming we all have Power BI Desktop installed, so this is Power BI meetup. Anybody last minute adds to any of those things? You have to unmute and let me know.
Yes.
Otherwise, go ahead. Otherwise, the rest of the agenda is, I'm going to spend a lot of time on some whiteboards. I would say this is more of a Git introduction than a Power BI introduction. Though we will look at Power BI projects and kind of how it works with Git and GitHub. So my technique will be to draw a bunch of whiteboards just to kind of give us some good introductions to Git. These are based on the way I teach students in programming to use Git. So I know Git and collaborating in a source control might be new for Power BI people, but we'll do the best we can. We will actually, do some following along with GitHub Desktop and Power BI Desktop to turn the preview feature on, clone it, work on a branch, edit and save and review our commits. These are there's a natural rhythm of using Git, and that's what I want those of here that are following along to experience a little bit, and those that are watching just to see. So, yeah. And then at the end, I give you a link to, I put a Udemy course out there this summer with this same content. So, questions before we get started? Otherwise, I'm going to kill PowerPoint. I really don't know how questions will come to me when I say that. So, who knows?
People will link them.
Yeah. All right. So we're going to start with an XKCD whiteboard. And XKCD is a popular nerd comic. Maybe somebody has seen it. But with this one, and I'm going to try to actually draw on this a little bit. And I'm going to draw with green, probably red. So I'm setting up my markers here. This is Git. It tracks collaborative work on projects through a beautiful distributed graph theory tree model. That I'm going to circle in green. Cool. How do we use it? I have no idea, right? Just memorize these shell commands and type them in to sync up. If you ever get errors, delete everything and start over, right? Red marker leaves the frown face, right? I like to give people a little bit of an introduction to graph theory. So we're not so much in the dark when things go wrong in Git, and we don't have to delete everything and start over. So that's kind of the goal here. If I started drawing my graph theory, I guess I'll stick with green here. But the only graph theory we really need to know about are two things, nodes and edges. Now, over here, these colors don't mean good or bad. It's not that nodes are good and edges are bad. They were just two colors that I had here. So, simple graph theory, I'm going to draw 3 nodes as circles, and we'll label them 1, 2, and 3. Everybody with me so far? Edges are lines, specifically arrows in our case, that connect those, right? So now edges, in Git terminology, Git is based on graph theory. In graph theory, we call them edges. In Git, they don't have an official name, but I always read them in my head as based on. Which now I can start from right to left, which is odd, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. And I could say 3 is based on 2, is based on 1, right? Can we squint at that and maybe see what's happening? Sometimes I can bring up this laser printer and say 3 is based on 2, is based on 1. So that's how I'm reading that. Maybe I'll throw one more edge in there, and I'll throw one more node in there, and we'll call this one A. And that same mental narrative of A is based on 2, is based on 1, right? But there's kind of a history of now, all these things out here on the right, they're typically called the head And everything here on the left is called the tail, right? Sometimes when we talk about graph theory, these arrowheads feel like they're in the wrong direction, because when we create new things, if I were to create another node on this graph, I would create it out here to the right. So people are wondering, well, why wouldn't that arrow go to the right? But arrows really go from head to tail, right? Oops, and I didn't mean to grab the eraser there, so how do I undo? Undo, I meant to grab this guy. Head to tail. 4 is based on 3 is based on 2. Good. Yeah. I get nods in the room, so you're going to be my PACE students, my PACE attendees. And if anybody has questions online, I don't know, chat, somebody will see them or interrupt. Let's see, based on, now this gets really techy and probably deeper into graph theory than we need. But what we're seeing up here is a DAG, or a directed acyclic graph. Now, it was graph theory, I wanted to get your graph theory money's worth. Directed really just means arrowheads, right? Graph theory without arrowheads, it would still be a graph, but it wouldn't be directed, right? The arrowheads give us direction. Acyclic, it's not very important for us as users of Git, but it's important for the creators of Git that you can never start at a node, follow arrows, and get back to yourself, right? So you can't recurse within the graph, which is very important. Let's see, I'm looking at my notes to make sure I didn't leave anything out. And G stands for graph. The only other thing, I forgot to put up my synonym for nodes. In Git, we'll call these commits. You'll make a commit, right? So this first node on our day here is some commit. Now, commits can be adding files, so I could say +3 new files. They could be deleting 2 files. I'm just going to not put the word files there, but a single commit could be adding 3 files, deleting 2 files, and modifying 6 files, right? So commits are these, they're just small circles on this whiteboard, but they can be many changes, right? And we'll see when we start working with this that those changes, what they actually are when we make a change to a report in Power BI Desktop. We'll get to see what those changes are before we commit them. So, that was going to be this whiteboard. I think I'm just going to scroll up, and I never know if we should start the demo or draw another whiteboard. I like whiteboards, so I'm just going to scroll these up and just draw another one. But here our task is going to be to build a smiley face. And we're not doing this in Git yet, but we're going to do it in a directed acyclic graph on the whiteboard. I'm going to put some concept of main and put one commit on main. And since we're drawing a smiley face, it has the outline of a head, right? So the outline of the smiley face. Now, I'm going to continue our acyclic graph here. I'm not going to worry about switching colors, but there's this concept of branching in Git. And I might create a branch to work on the eyes. And I might create a branch to work on the nose. And you might be able to guess this one. I might create a third branch to work on the mouth. Right? So these branches, remember, arrows are based on. So this mouth branch is based on the main branch. Sometimes, and I usually like to have a very light color here, but I don't have any good light colors. Well, that's pretty light, might not even be visible. Sometimes you put swim lanes here. Like, they're optional. A DAG doesn't need swim lanes, but that's telling me that, oh, as I make commits to the eyes, I'm going to do them left to right in that swim lane. So if I'm working on eyes, what's the first thing I'm going to do? I might just put a couple of dots in there, right? Those represent eyes. And if we take that commit and combine it with the main commit, again, I'm going to do it in a light thing that nobody's even going to see, but that's okay. But you can kind of see that I would have those two things, right? If I could mentally combine those two nodes on that graph, then I have a circle from main and a set of eyes from the dot. Getting some nods in here? Yeah. I might not get my visualization correct the first time when I'm working in Power BI, right? I might have to make another commit. Somebody didn't like those eyes. They didn't like that report that I built or that dashboard that I built. So maybe since I'm working on eyes, I'm going to take another shot at it. Somebody wanted kind of more Google eyes. I'm drawing those. Oops, and here we're waiting for Microsoft Whiteboard to work. Oh, this is always a problem with technology. Specifically, Whiteboard working with MS Teams is always a little bit touch and go. So you can kind of see some things happen there, but maybe that was my second commit on the eyes branch, and somebody said, no, that's not right. You know, we want dot eyes and kind of frown eyebrows. And we're making a smiley face. I'll make happy eyebrows. So and we'll do this in a minute, but I closed the repository. I created a branch called eyes, and I started working on the eyes, right? Good. Nose, we'll simplify some of these, but you know, maybe the person working on nose committed a dot for a nose, and they showed their teammates or their stakeholders, and that dot wasn't right, so they turned it into a little triangle nose. Right? Maybe the mouth people started, there was somebody funny, and their first thing was a frown face, and they showed it to their stakeholders and said, no, we're supposed to be building a smiley face, right? Again, I haven't continued to draw these, but if I took the last branch that it's based on all of those, this one here kind of would just look like that and have the outline of a head. This one here would ultimately look like that, right? Now, those are all of us working on features. Think of these face or smiley face parts as maybe a visualization, maybe a tab, maybe something within a Power BI report. How do we get the work on we'll start with the nose branch. How do we get that into the main line? And I don't want to use red. Red to me always seems like it's bad, so I'll do a blue marker here. We make a pull request for a PR. And we say, yep, I've worked on this nose feature, and I want, this is the first PR, so PR number 1. I want it to be brought into the main line. And then you can imagine, if it gets brought in, main line starts to look like that, right? If the mouth came in second, and maybe the mouth was the second PR request, and the eyes were the third PR request, but it doesn't matter what order the requests come in. It matters how when the pull request is accepted or not. We'll get to all of this. I might be wearing out my whiteboard time here as I look at dozing faces in the room, but maybe PR2 or PR3 was accepted next. So can we build what that looks like in our mind up here? So I should stick with the black marker. If PR3 was accepted, that commit now has the face and the nose from previously, and then it has these eyes with eyebrows, right? And that PR was accepted. And then finally, our final PR was accepted, and you're all getting sick of me probably drawing on this whiteboard, and we might have a true smiley face, right? So you can work on features. These directed acyclic graphs or GitHub repositories, they save all your history, right? How many people, I mean, I teach Power BI, but I haven't had a lot of experience with it in the real world. I'm sure you make changes to a Power BI report over time. And now you kind of just have the last version of it, unless you save different files off or things like that. So Git is a way to work collaboratively and share all that. I do have one more whiteboard before we start, but any questions on that one? Okay.
No questions on YouTube, but we did have a couple of people who wanted to join them.
Wanted to join?
Yeah.
Let me draw this next whiteboard, and then we'll invite those people as I turn over to the tool. So, thanks for monitoring. This one is just me rationalizing using a GUI, right? I'm going to draw 2 pyramids here. Put a line in the middle. On this one, I'm going to put GUI, and on this one, I'm going to put CLI. Anybody know anybody in this room know what the CLI acronym means? Yeah. Anybody know what the GUI means? Yeah. So we have command line interface CLI and graphical user interface GUI, right? If I label these pyramids A and B, and then ask a question A or B, but you really don't know what I'm asking here. But if we think of the pyramid as you have to have a solid base to build upon, which one of these pyramids do we think gives us the more solid base to be good at Git? The command line interface or point and click graphical user interface?
Probably A.
So most people would answer A, right? Because command line, whoa, magicians or the hackers on movies, they bring up the command line. I'm a Power BI report creator, I want to stay as far away from the command line as possible. Well, my argument with these pyramids are, it doesn't matter, A or B, and I actually prefer a GUI. But my rationalization, and something I like to share with students or people I'm talking to, is I think there's something bigger. There's a different base to the pyramid, and those are the DAGs, right? Which we just spent, 20 minutes or so, 16 minutes, talking about directed acyclic graphs, the graph theory. I mean, my contention is that if you know DAGs, this other stuff, I'll switch analogies from pyramid to iceberg, right? The visible part of the iceberg is like pales in comparison to what's below the surface of the water. And I realize I'm switching analogies there, but understanding DAGs, and that whether you're using the command line interface with some fancy Git command, or you're using a point and click GUI, you're just moving commits and you're moving circles and arrows around on a directed acyclic graph. That's all you're ever doing in Git. So we're going to use GitHub GUI, GitHub Desktop GUI. Leonard told me that other people want to be invited to the org. So do you have their usernames? Or can somebody read them to me? Okay, so I'm going to go to my browser here. I'm going to go to this GitHub org. We're going to invite members and
SH.
Yep.
AN OB. N as in Napoleon, sorry.
No, that's me not hearing right.
OB, and then PK.
That's that person? Yep. So I'm inviting people, and you're just going to be a member of the org, which will allow you to follow along. Some people here said that invite shows up here in your inbox, maybe up here at the top. Is that where it showed up, or somewhere?
I went to my organization.
You went to your so the guidance is go to your organization. So if you log into GitHub in the browser and go to your organizations, you would be able to accept and join. But I think I have to invite other people, so I can't show that.
Yeah, I've got one more.
Yep.
K. Capital T. Capital T.
Yeah.
AR.
AR?
Yeah. GO. That's it.
Nice.
Wait, one more.
One more. All right, we're good. Again, these follow-along demos, maybe they're not appropriate for medicine or for meetup groups, but this is the way I teach classes, so it's easier to corral students that are enrolled in a class. What's the new one?
I'm not sure.
I sent it to you in Teams.
It's in Teams. Okay, there we are. And Teams is ABB AD OOBA. Cool. Part of this now.
Yes, you're in forever. You are in.
The other thing while we're waiting is everybody should go to desktop.github.com and install GitHub Desktop, right? Now, I'm fully aware, like Microsoft wants us to do our Git work in Visual Studio Code, and that's great. I love that as well. But this one has some features that I like that I think, again, if we understand DAGs, it does some of the everyday stuff, masking some of the Git complexities from us. So, and this exists for, well, we'll all be in Windows because we're Power BI desktop users, but this also exists for all the operating systems, Mac, Windows, Linux. Are we good to kind of continue on with the demo?
We lost the screen in the room.
Oh, okay.
Usually it's just timed out.
Yep.
But I don't know where the keyboard is.
Is it connected to that one?
When I just press a button.
I'm not being on Teams,
We're being rescued.
oops. That probably shouldn't be speaking.
You're still on Teams.
Yeah, good.
So everyone in the other room and online can see it. that's the camera. All fun stuff.
I know we've sold this before.
Yes, we did.
You want me to be just waiting? Talking?
Do a little song and dance.
I can't do, no can do.
Oh, there he goes. Okay, you're back.
Hold it.
Okay, so with those whiteboard introductions and getting people invited to the organization and hopefully downloading and installing GitHub Desktop. Again, the prerequisites are a little bit tough for meetups, but let's launch GitHub Desktop. So I press start and just type Git and GitHub Desktop will come up.
Am I supposed to just
And
register?
you'll have to have logged in to GitHub Desktop the first time you run it. And it might allow a browser to have you log into GitHub. So I'm going to look at the people in the room that want GitHub Desktop. Yep. Cool. Then the first thing we want to do, like GitHub Desktop, I use it for a lot of repository, right? This is for a programming class I'm teaching. So you won't see this current repository right now. You're probably looking at some screen that just says repository. So I'm going to choose File, Clone Repository, and you all might be looking at something like this, right? To me, I have a lot of them here. You might not have a lot of repositories. I'm an avid GitHub user, but maybe you type something like Madison Fabric UG, right? So I typed Madison Fabric. So again, I chose File, Clone Repository. Then I'm cloning it from github.com. And since I invited you all and you all joined, you should be able to search for Madison Fabric and actually see this Madison Fabric UG / life expectancy. In the room, we're good? We see that? Okay. Choose that. You can choose to put things locally. I like that GitHub Desktop just puts a GitHub folder in my documents folder, and then everything I clone, it just makes a subfolder. So I tell students, and I'll tell you, once you start using GitHub, you don't worry about where it goes locally, because all your work will be work locally and then push it back up to GitHub, right? So it doesn't matter if it's on my C drive, it's on my, I would say you don't want it on like an external drive because those can be slower. So, but I just use the defaults there. So I'm going to press clone. My window's going to go away, so I'm leaving it up here for anybody that might be following along. But we're cloning from the Madison Fabric User Group repository called Life Expectancy. Now, cloning, we're waiting a little bit there. It's pulling stuff down from the cloud, right? And I said I was done with whiteboards, but as soon as mine gets pulled down from the cloud, I am going to sneak back and draw one more thing on the whiteboard. So if you have it cloned, you should see that your current repository is life expectancy. You're probably on the main branch. And then it says fetched, never fetched. Well, we just kind of cloned it, so technically we haven't fetched it, but it's fresh. But I say GitHub Desktop users, press this button early and often, right? And that button shows up in a lot of places. So it's like always update my local copy of this repository with whatever's out there in the cloud, with whatever's out there in the shared repository. And maybe that's a segue to another orientation whiteboard that I like to draw. And this one just kind of has a line down the middle. And up above, I call it cloud, but there's many synonyms here. We might call it GitHub, because that's in the cloud, right? We might call this, I mean, you heard me say it's a shared repository, so I'm going to abbreviate that to be shared repo. Really nerdy Git terms might call it, and you might see it called the origin, you might see it called a remote. You know, all those things have slightly different meanings, but just think of it as the directed acyclic graph above the line. In fact, I know that when you clone it, it starts with, this is almost the accurate DAG above the line. There are 5 commits, right? cloning brings those 5 commits down here. So I always like to kind of write that operation. We just cloned a repository and we brought those 5 commits locally. You know, so this is an entire copy of that repository, right? 5 commits on one branch, but the whole idea in Git is you work locally in a safe area, right? I can wreck all this, and I'm not wrecking it for everybody else, right? I'm working locally. So I can, you know, create branches down here, game with my PBIP, with my Power BI reports. And if I never want to share them, I never have to, right? They're just stuff that's local and only remain local. I don't have many synonyms locally. It's kind of funny. Sometimes I do write on there that this is, if I'm using GitHub desktop, keyword being desktop there, meaning that's looking at my local repository. If I'm using GitHub in the browser, that means I'm probably looking at the shared repository. What's funny here is there's a great parallel, Power BI desktop. What is that? You're working on a PBIX file locally. The Power BI service, what is that? Something in the cloud, right? So I actually think, you know, for Power BI people, GitHub desktop, there's a nice analogous feel to Power BI desktop. And then GitHub in the browser or GitHub in the cloud is a nice analogy to the Power BI service where we publish our PBIXs. But maybe it's a loose analogy. So we cloned it. I drew here that there were 5, but I'm going back to GitHub desktop. And I'm going to, you know, explore these 2 tabs just a little bit. We already kind of talked about this top row, which orients us to where we are. But I'm currently on a changes tab, and there are 0 changed files. Makes sense, right? If I come over here to the history tab, these are those 5 commits, starting with the most recent at the top. So this is the head. This is kind of a variation on the day, right? Going down this way. Even though they don't draw it. There are some GUI tools that draw it, but you know, these are 5 commits, and this last commit is 2 changed files. So remember when I said commits can be bulk changes, right? That last commit is 2 changed files. If I went back to this first commit or the second commit, the first commit was me just initializing the GitHub repository. But look at this one. This was 38 changed files. So a Power BI project is 38 files, fresh, right? We'll see a little bit, we'll start digging into that. In fact, maybe if there aren't any questions, let's next launch Power BI Desktop. So we've cloned this repository. Maybe I'll show one other feature before launching Power BI Desktop. If you, it's called GitHub Desktop, and I truly use it as a hub, right? On that repository menu, I have some good options. Like I can view in GitHub, which would open up a browser and show me that repository. I can get a Windows terminal there if I want. The one I'm going to choose is Show It in Explorer here, which says, show me my local file system where this repository is. And there's versions of this kind of follow-along demo where I'll use VS Code. I wasn't planning on using VS Code today, but you can actually open up this repository in Visual Studio Code. So I kind of use this to navigate. I like GitHub Desktop. So I might say repository, show and explorer, right? So you've cloned that repository locally. You're looking at it in GitHub Desktop. Let's show it in Windows Explorer. And here you can see those 38 files. Well, there's really only 3 of them at the root level. And then there's these other folders, which here we start to see what shared Power BI project is, right? There's a folder for my data set and a folder for my report, right? I'm not even going to go down and look at them too much, but we know that there were 38 total files, so somehow they're divided amongst things that I changed in my data set, like editing your model, and writing some DAX, that's probably data set stuff, and things that you change in your reports, changing colors, visualizations, moving, resizing visualizations, right? And we'll see that come to fruition here in a little bit. right? I would like to say we can all just double click this Power PBIP, but it won't work for you. If you tried it, it might have failed for you because Power BI projects is a preview feature and we have to turn it on before we can double click that. So this is why, and we will double click it momentarily, but first let's just launch Power BI desktop. And all of you probably turned on preview features before, so you're at the mercy of how slow my Surface laptop is. They have an update going on, but
The PBIX file was showing up in desktop. And I pulled it, but it's already there. So.
Did you double click the PBIP? No. Oh, well, there should be. You shouldn't see a PBIX, but we'll see. I don't think anything's too bad yet. So I'm going to go File, Options and Settings, Options. Mine's already chosen, so you'll see me show a checkbox that's checked. Yours will not have been checked, right? Down over here with Preview Features, right? So we loaded up Preview Features, and this one there. Now, we're not going to, if you do this, you can save PBIX files as PBIP files. We don't have to do that because you're already invited to an org that has set that up. So we're just going to learn day-to-day Git habits working with Power BI projects. But know that when you turn this preview feature on, you can save a file as a PBIP and create those 38 files and add them to your own Git repository. So, and I can demo that at the end, but I think the other stuff's more interesting than creating one for the first time. I figured most users, ultimately when this hits some sort of people are really using it, which I don't think it's there yet, you know, you'll be invited to work on a PBIP file, right? And you'll clone it and do kind of the steps that we're doing today. Everybody turn that feature on that wants it to. Now, then you should be able to shut down Power BI, and I like to close things down all the way. I'm going to remove the files. I had an unrecovered layer. But then I'm going to double click life expectancy.pbip. Now, are other people seeing some PBIXs in this folder? Because I don't think we should be. I know I have one person in this room.
Power BI shows up as recent file.
And oh, well, that might be, so I'm double clicking it.
G PBIX, but
Oh no, that's the one the last follow along demo you did with me. That's not this file. Right. You know, so we have an attendee that decided to come back for more torture, a follow along demo with Tom. Right. So we had named one last time. Are PBIPs opening for people now in the room? Cool. You're monitoring the chat. Nobody's.
One person might need re-inviting.
I can pause now and do that.
Okay.
I don't mind at all. I'm a one for all for one teacher. Right? I like stop the class, bring the student up to the front of the room, say, you were the unlucky one today. Everybody else is going to mess up in the future, and it's good for everybody to see it. Not that anybody messed up. It's always the teacher's fault, but I can come to members, I can invite them. And I have the
It's a KA.
KA.
So I do see it in the list as invited.
Oh, yeah. So it looks like they've actually accepted. Okay. So they are in, right? So
Okay, great. I might just be behind.
No, that's perfect. Yeah, I hijacked some Microsoft sample just to have interesting stuff to work on, right? So this life expectancy was a PBIX from 2009 or something like that I had saved as a PBIP so we could open it up. And I think I already mentioned this. We're not going to do much Power BI desktop work, right? We more want to see like what are habits of working collaboratively. So maybe the first thing I'll do is if we all got it open, that's groovy. Let's go back to Power BI desktop. Most likely in an organization, you're not going to be able to make commits directly to the main branch. Sometimes it's labeled the master branch, sometimes it's labeled the main branch, but there's some pristine main line of code where it's protected, right? So I mentioned in that whiteboard that we want to create branches locally to work on. So we can try out some new ideas, see them work, and save them, even save them up in the cloud, but not affect the current published report. So a very common habit in working in Git is always create a branch before you do anything, right? We already opened the file, so maybe I wished I created a branch before we opened the file, but there are many ways you can hit the branch menu and say new branch. I think if you drop this down, you can say new branch there. So choose one of those ways. Let's create a new branch. This is just a naming convention, but I like to put my first initial last name and then a forward slash, and then say the branch name might be, you know, follow. Naming's hard. Follow along demo, something like that, right? So this is really just a branch naming convention. A lot of Git tools will take the forward slash and kind of show it to you as like a folder structure, right? So all of Steele's branches are now going to be under Steele whack, right? It's not necessary. It's just really putting a whack in the name of the branch, right? But sometimes I teach that convention. So let's create that branch, right? So I created one. I'm currently on Steele follow along demo. That's what I named your branch. You might have named it something else. Everybody get a new branch created, right? I'm going to follow along over to the whiteboard. What did we all just do? We all just created an edge here. We didn't make any commit, but this first, and notice I'm drawing this below the line too. Main exists there. We just created a new branch and I named mine TS follow along demo, TS fat, right? We don't have any changes or any commits, but we have that edge. But notice that edge, nobody else can see that edge, right? Remember, this is my first example of we did something locally that if I went out here, I wouldn't be able to see that, right? So in other words, if I wanted to view the repository above the line, I would go to my browser and to GitHub in my organization, and I see this life expectancy, and I see that, oh, there's some way that I can look at branches, and there is just one branch out there, right? Let's go back to GitHub Desktop. And notice this doesn't say fetch anymore, but it says publish this branch. So here's where I cross my fingers and toes that we can all press publish branch, and suddenly our organization, all these branches will show up there. Or I wouldn't have given members proper rights and might have errors. So everybody try to press that and fingers and toes crossed. Mine was able to push out there. So I can already go back to my browser and do a refresh. And I can see my branch got out there, E. Wenzel's, DWH, Dognos, Dr. Rob's, right? So our first taste of working collaboratively, right? And you know, once you push things above the line, in this case, we use something called publish, other people can see it. I could switch to DWH's follow-on demo branch and look at their version of this Power BI project, right? So this is working collaboratively. As programmers, we do it with JavaScript or Java or Python, right? But here we're doing it with the PBIX, which is like doing it with a sledgehammer, right? I think the story is going to get better. You'll see we'll make some changes. It's kind of gross, but at least we're starting to be able to preserve version history and work collaboratively, right? You all have ways to do that anyhow. This is just a new way to do that. I'll refresh one more time to see if we got any new branches. So we lost some follow-alongers because everybody's branch isn't out there. Maybe I would come back here and say, yeah, what did we do? We pushed something up. And I use the word push. GitHub Desktop called it publish. The first time you push something, you're publishing it, making it visible. But you know, this is synonym soup. Say that quickly in a meetup. This is publish, push. Sometimes some tools will, I can put double arrowheads and they'll call sync. Clone is the way you get a repository the first time, but there's also pull. There's also fetch, right? This is word soup, I realize. But what I'm trying to convey is all these things mean the same thing. I'm either getting something from the shared repository in the cloud locally, or I'm pushing something up the direction from locally up there, right? And actually, this all looks like this now. My branch is out there, and about 5 other branches are out there, right? So my whiteboards get incoherent, but hopefully, if you've seen them grow from nothing, you're still following along. Are we all good? Okay, let's start making changes just to investigate this. So if I'm making changes to a Power BI report, I'm doing that in Power BI Desktop. Let's see. You can follow along with my changes. You might already start making your own changes, but I don't like that this says 72.05. Seems like false precision to me. If I click it, and your all's Power BI Desktop might be set up different, but I can see over here that it's coming from some metrics table. Again, I don't know if this Power BI report is using best practices. It's from 2009. But if I expand metrics, I can go down. Basically, in my mind, I'm just following this little checkbox around to say, oh, it's got to be under there somewhere, right? And I'm coming down here, and I see its life expectancy, so I clicked it. And then I'm looking at my DAX bar there, or my formula bar. I don't even know what we call these things. And I see, oh, it's calling round up with an average, blah, blah, blah. This last parameter to round up is the number of decimal places to round to. So, if I want to get rid of 72.05, maybe we can all change that 2 to a 0. And have to press enter to actually have that formula go in. And Power BI is recalculating. It went up to 73 because it's calling round up, right? And I set it to 0, so 0.05 is more than 72, so it went up to 73, right? So we're seeing some cool stuff. Right now, like when I was drawing that smiley face, this might be my first attempt. Let's do Control S to save this bad boy, right? So I pressed Control S, it's working on it, it saved it. I made my first attempt. I'm a rookie Power BI desktop user. I edited some DAX, blah, blah, blah. I want to make a commit. I want some evidence.
Long paths.
What's that?
Power BI does not like long paths.
Yeah, you probably, well, I save mine in documents,
Yeah,
but
let me have to place to save it, or I save that type thing.
yeah, sorry about that.
I'll save it somewhere else.
Yeah. Well, you have to clone it somewhere else, actually. So you can't really do any save as, so you have to re-clone to a new location. We're not waiting for you.
No.
You can watch the video afterwards. So, I pressed Control S, but let's go to Power BI Desktop. Remember, it did some changes there. If we go to Power BI Desktop, and I'm on the History tab, and that shows me those 5 existing commits. But notice there's this little badge next to changes on that says 2. Let's go look at what those changes are, right? These are uncommitted changes, and I can see that it's changed 2 files, some data cache, which I'm not going to be too interested in, but it's changed a model.bin file, right? Before this, we kicked off my version of this demo. Smarter people than me were talking about tabular editor and bin files. I just know enough I can click that, and I can review the changes over here, right? So this is kind of cool. We can start to see how Power BI is saving our DAX, right? So I didn't expect this first change, but my Power BI desktop must have been updated. So went from 23.09 to 23.10, right? But this one's maybe more interesting. You can kind of see that, oh, there's some life expectancy to measure. Technically, this is JSON, even though it's a .bin file, but it's a measure. Programmers would say that's an array. This is an object. Who cares? We're not programmers. We're DAX people, though, and we hopefully can spot that that's the change that I made, right? We want to commit changes. And remember, we're in GitHub Desktop below the line. I call these diary commits. Round to 0 decimal places. Maybe down here in the description, I'll say, gonna show my stakeholders. Not sure they are going to like 73. I call these notes to myself, diary commits, right? When you might not remember, you might have blocked it from your memory, but when we were building our smiley face on the whiteboard, we made pull requests, right? All these diary commits, they can get squashed out, so we're really just leaving notes to ourselves, right? Going to show my stakeholders, not sure they're going to like that it got rounded up to 73.00, but I'm going to make that commit. And then I'm going to notice after I make the commit, that just means I made a circle locally. This is how I would, one of these buttons would be how I would push it up above the cloud, right? So I'm going to do both those actions here. And then when mine are complete, I'm going to just go draw what we just did on the whiteboard, right? Maybe I'll switch colors. I don't like red, but I'll go to green. We all just, on our branch, we made a commit, and then we pushed everything out. So that commit exists out there. You all could go look at my branch if you wanted and see the Power BI report that now says 73.00. And if all of you made commits, all of you kind of have your nodes out there as well, right? Once we start working above the line, there's a lot of Big Brother happening, right? Because I can go to the browser and look at it above the line, and I'm going to do a refresh here. And I can kind of see 3 of us made these commits, right? So 3 of us, well, I shouldn't say that. 3 of us made the commits and pushed them above the line, right? I'm not going to go too deep into this, but it's very important to kind of understand once you get more into Git that, hey, I'm 1 commit ahead of the main line. So I'm 0 behind. In other words, the main line hasn't changed, but I have 1 commit that the main line doesn't have, right? If I horsed around on my local DAG with the with this, from this I see every commit in the main line, right? But the head of the main branch is this one. There's no way it can see my commit, right? So I'm 0 behind and 1 ahead. I have 1 commit that main can't see, right? Due to arrowheads, and I can see all the commits in main. If work kept happening on main, then I would get behind main, right? But I'm probably not going to go too deep into that. I'm going to do a refresh, see if anybody else pushed any commits out. Doesn't look like it, so my goal is to start with 5 and end with 0, so I'm going to keep making this demo harder till people can't follow along. I gotta laugh. It's delayed, it must be going out to the interwebs. I showed my stakeholders, they told me, I don't think you got that right? Maybe I would come back and switch that back. I don't know. In the end, I think what they wanted us to do was probably come up, well, maybe I would switch that back because I don't want rounding up, right? So I might make that change back to 2. Sorry, I'm really messing up. I'm going to Control Z that. But I made that change back to 2. And I press enter. So it says 72.05 again. But then I realized, oh, they just don't want to show the decimal points. So I'm coming up here, with that measure selected, I'm in measure tools, and I'm going to tick this down 2, right? So it says 2, but I'm going to tick it down once, pointy clicky, tick it down twice. Maybe that second click didn't work, so I'm going to try it again. That's probably what they wanted, right? So let's do we did that. Let's do a Control S. Here we're into the rhythm or the habit, right? Make a change, make a very small change. Go look at GitHub Desktop and view those changes, right? And I'm always just choosing model.bin here. And we can kind of see, well, it's funny, things happened a little bit, like format string changed from 0.00 to just 0, right? This went back up to 2 because we undid our last change, and we got some annotation in there. This is really inside baseball, right? So the people at Microsoft who build Power BI Desktop, they kind of say, well, I bet if my measure is a number, but the format string is 0, I have to give some formatting hints to say that, oh, really, this is a decimal, right? So who knows? But I don't care too much, but I can make a diary commit to myself that says, oops, didn't want to round 0. And then I came down here and said, just wanted to change the format. You know, I use the first line for something very short and then this other section for kind of more explanation. These aren't maybe the best commit messages, but you can see how they're conversational in nature. My recommendations are talk to yourself or a future version of yourself, right? Because you can go look at the history and maybe read a subtle narrative there, like, oh yeah, I remember I tried that, that didn't work, blah, blah, blah. So I'm going to commit this locally, push that out to the origin, commit and push. You know, I'm not going to redraw the DAG or anything, but I will go look out here, do a refresh to make sure I now have 2 commits out there, right? I'm 2 commits ahead. This is my branch. And I've successfully lost everybody trying to follow along. Oh, no, I didn't. Oh, dog knows there. Yeah, so good so far. I'm going to pause for questions. We're going to make another change here and see a little more inside baseball behind, like what changes if I change a visualization. Oh, maybe one thing, and I know I said I paused for questions. If we look at the history of this, our commits are showing up in the history now, right? If I did a fetch, I can also see everybody else's origin branch, right? So I could go look at other people's stuff, right? But what I didn't point out was, I pointed out that our changes, well, I'm going to click it, and before I draw on it, our changes were in model.bim. But remember when I showed that a Power BI project has 2 folders, a data set and a report folder? And I kind of said in passing, when you're editing DAX, you're probably messing with the data set, right? I edited some DAX, I'm messing with the data set, right? So my file was changed in that data set folder. I'm going to pause again for questions on any of this, and we'll make another change and kind of go through one more pass here. How are we doing on time? This goes till 7, or? I'm not sure how.
Yes. It's doing good.
All right, no questions. Perfect. You know, I wanted to kind of point out what if we size something. So I'm just going to pick on the same visual and make it shorter. Maybe somebody said I don't like it encroaching on South America so much, right? Even though, so I made it smaller. I'm going to do a Control S to save it. And what do I do after doing Control S? I might want to go look, right? I might want to go look at GitHub Desktop and see, oh, this time only 1 file changed. And sure enough, this time it changed in the .report folder, and the file that changed was something called report.json. Now, here's where I think Power BI Desktop will improve, right? And it probably is a better experience using Tabular Editor, which I'm not familiar with. But notice the deltas or the differences over here. It like somehow just by resizing that visualization, it kind of deleted a bunch of stuff in red and then re-added some stuff back, right? So right now, Power BI Desktop is like a sledgehammer. I resized a viz and it like changed all kinds of stuff, right? I believe that's where improvements will come. I can still scroll down. It's not, all is not bad, right? I can still squint at this and say, ah, yeah, I messed around with the width and height and the X and Y coordinates of something. So all is not lost, but I think that this story is only going to improve. Chris, our insider, probably has already seen how much better this is going to be in the future.
I have not.
But we can say, you know, note to self, resize the viz. South America no longer infringed upon. I try to be funny in my comments, but I know it doesn't work. But we can commit this locally. We're below the line, push it out. Now we're above the line. Right.
I'm guessing committing often is very helpful.
Yes.
Because if you do a whole afternoon's worth of reshaping and resizing, that report.json file will just look like everything
Exactly.
changed and you'll have no idea.
Exactly. Your current processes, I'm guessing, are like save another version of a PBIX, make change, save another version of a PBIX, right?
Yes.
So this is, we're never saving a new PBIP, right? We're just making commits within there. And I always say, as Leonard just pointed out, commit early, commit often, right? The next step would be, well, yeah, we showed our stakeholders and they love these changes, right? And you all can make pull requests as well, but typically work will be assigned to fix a feature to one Power BI expert or one developer in my dev world, and only one person will make the pull request for this change. You all might be working on the key drivers portion, which you can kind of see that's pretty neat, right? Maybe we all don't want to be working on the same thing because we'll have a bunch of merge conflicts. You might hear that once you get into the Git world. And right now, I suspect resolving merge conflicts is not going to be that easy, right? Because of the sledgehammer of work in the PBIP, but I think it will all get better, right? But to make pull requests, that's something we do only in the shared repository. I didn't want to go back to the whiteboard, but I will one more time, right? A pull request is something that says, yeah, well, actually I have more commits, but if I want my commits from my branch that fix this bug in this report, if I want them into the main line, I make a request that they get pulled into the main line. So this is why we get the vocabulary that we have. It's kind of not good vocabulary. Technically, we call them pull requests, but there's just moving circles on a DAG from one branch to another, right? So, and we do that only in the shared repository. So I'm going to go back to my browser because that's where I look at my branch in the shared repository. And in fact, it's such a common thing. It exists out here, right? This is my branch. I have 3 commits that main does not have. I want those 3 commits to be brought into main. I worked on them, took me 3 commits to get it right, but finally I've shown my stakeholders they like the new report. Again, I apologize for the simplistic report changes, but I'm going to create a new pull request, right? A pull request defaults to like what your branch name is, so that's what I named my branch. I don't like that, right? I might say, you know, this fixes the rounding and size problem on the first page of the report. Yeah, I know. I went to a meetup and watched some guy type, but they had pizza and beer. So here I'm just overemphasizing, like, be nice to your future self. Be nice to other members on your team. Don't always accept the defaults. Try to summarize what your changes are. Create that pull request. You know, I don't know if other people are going to create pull requests, but this gives somebody an opportunity to review that. Like I can see, oh yeah, how did they fix that? I can look at all of the changed files, right? And all of you can see this. I'm pretty sure everybody can see pull requests out here, this pull request tab. So fix rounding size. So yeah, do 09942 made a pull request as well. In fact, let's go look at their pull request. I'm going to pop into fixing rounding on the first page, look at what files they changed. And I can kind of see they had a version change. So we're looking at the same deltas, right? Differences. Deltas is a fancy word for differences. And we can see that, yeah, they fixed it. So guess what? I'm going to accept this person's pull request. Oh, yeah, let's do it this way. I'm going to show you kind of like, we'll end on a pitfall since I know we're at ending time.
We are very close to ending. There's one question.
Okay, let's make a question and then we'll see.
I wanted to come in and see if anyone is aware of this or if you have had a chance to look at this. There is a new co-pilot for Git that's being integrated. So understanding the terminology you're using is quickly going to be more important than understanding the actual activities that you're doing, right? So
so the whiteboards are the takeaway for today.
Yeah, and so if you're not familiar with what Copilot is, it is very akin to like ChatGPT, but you just say what you want it to do, And it is very good at learning things that are very programmatic, like Git or C or JavaScript. It's exceptionally good at that. And it'll just do whatever it is you tell it to do. Now, it's going to do what you tell it to do, though. So understand what these terms are, understand what like a pull is, what a push is, what a rebase, or I don't even.
I didn't cover rebase.
Okay, yeah. What's,
that's a thing.
learn what those verbs or nouns are, and but then this will get much easier in the months and years to come.
Yes. And maybe we're at time, so I don't even have to do any more demoing.
Oh, okay, all right. Well,
I mean, I don't know. I'm welcome to keep going, or I'm happy to keep going, or, you know.
well, and why don't we just, we're going to go ahead and end the live stream. So thank you guys also very much for joining us on YouTube. We're going to continue the conversation locally here in Madison, though. So for those of you who are near Madison, you should have driven over. You're missing out on some incredible ongoing conversation here. But thank you all for tuning in, and we're going to sign off now. Hello.
Chris was a nice doomsayer, right? AI is going to take all of our jobs away, or me as a programmer. I would say yes.
Baker Tilly Digital combines strategic industry insight and advanced technical expertise to uncover and solve your digital transformation challenges. If you're interested in learning more, check out our website at bakertilly.com/digital.